Hello everyone, this is Aryan from More Than Just a Game, and today we will go through how to set up a ring game poker blueprint and use it in your game. This is relatively a more complicated tutorial due to the replicated nature of this template. So make sure you follow along and ask any questions that you may have. For this tutorial, I'll be using Unreal Engine 5.4, but it works on any version above 421, so you can use any version that's compatible. So first thing to mention is that you need to have two maps. One is the lobby map, the other one is the game map. This is again due to the replicated nature of the template. All players would go to the lobby map at first, and then they would be transitioned into the game map to play the game. The transition map is optional. You can have or not have it if you want. So first we'll go through how to set up the lobby map and the things you need to do. The first thing you need to have in your lobby map is an instance of this actor session creation table, and if you want to change its mesh or anything, you can just open it up and change its looks as you desire. When you interact with this table, with this actor in the game, an instance of some widget would be created, which is called WBP Session Finder. This is the widget that would be created when you interact with that actor. So you can make any sort of visual changes you want in this actor. You also need to set up a data asset for this actor you have in your scene. We have an example of this set up in here. This is the parent data asset. It's called the apoker version data asset. So you can just create an instance of that, or you can just duplicate this sample one we have here. So there are some properties you can set up in here and customize your poker variation. I'll go through them one by one. So these are the set of parameters are related to the game sequence and how the game would play out. The first two ones are basically the blinds we have for the game. By default, I've set them to 1 and 2. Uh, if you're familiar with poker, you already know what blinds are. And then we have the action timer, how much time each player initially has to take action. And then this is the extra time per turn that is given to each player. So if you have 5 seconds left and you take action, you will be granted 10 extra seconds. So the next time it's your turn, you have 15 seconds. And then these are just some delays that define how the game would play out. So like, I don't know, spawn delay for cards, I've set this to 0. This would mean that the time between spawning each of the cards and moving them to the deck would be 0. This would basically mean that each frame we spawn a new card. So spawning the whole deck would take 52 frames. And there are some just other delays and other like travel time variables. So like this is how much time it would take from cards to travel from the where they spawn to the deck location. This is like a fraction of a second or something like that. You can just play with these and see how it plays out and what you like the most. Uh, this is okay. Before that, these are the level names. You have like I said, you have to create two maps. One is the lobby map, the other is the game map. You have to set up their names here. The next is just some textures for emojis. Players can interact with each other by having some emojis pop on their profile as they are playing the game. These are just the textures for those emojis. Then we have some sound effects. Win sound effect is when you win that hand. Lose sound effect is for when you lose that hand. Turn sound effect is played when it's this player's turn. So like when the turn changes and it's some other player's turn, this wouldn't play. But when it's your turn to play, this sound effect would play. And then we have the action sound effect. This would play when any of the players take action. The next variable we have is related to your poker variation, and it comes from a data table. You can find the data table over here. As you can see, we have some variations built in, and these are the rows are based on this struct. So let me explain what it does. The first variable is how many cards each player will be dealt when the game starts. The second one is how many of the player's cards have to be included in the combo that defines their hand's rank. And the last one is whether this value should be absolute or not. So if you set this to true and set this to 2, like we have over here, this means that the combo that defines the player's hand's rank has to include exactly 2 cards from the player's cards. If this is set to false, it means that any number more than 2 or more than 2 can be included in that combo. And when we set this to 0, like we have here, it would mean that none of the players' cards are mandatory to be in the combo. So the combo can be purely made out of the community cards in this variation. So yeah, this is what it does, and you assign a row name to it, and you write the row name in here. Then we have the textures for the cards. Space textures, clubs, diamonds, hearts, and the back face texture. The only important note is that these have to be sorted from ace to king for all of them, for all 4 of them. Then these are the room options we have. These are mostly related to the lobby. So we have 2, 6, and 9 for room capacities in the room options. This would mean that when you create a session, you can select that as the creator of the session, as the creator of the room. You can select whether you want to have 2 people in the session, or 6 people in the session, or 9 players in the session. You can select between these options. And then we have the minimum buy-in and maximum buy-in. This is also again an option that is given to the session creator. The next 2 variables are the name of the save slots that would store some info about the user and the session they're joining or creating. I wouldn't change the names unless you have a similar name in your code, in your pre-existing code. If you have the exact same name used for some other slot, you need to change this. But if they're unique and you don't have anything named these, you can just leave them as they are. These other 2 variables are the initial balance that the user has when they open up the game, and this is the amount of balance that's added to their balance when they click the add balance button. These kind of make sense only for the simulation you do in the editor. In the actual game you want to have, you probably need to have a backend and add some more complicated functionality for adding balance and all that. These next 2 variables define whether this is going to be builds upon the dedicated server approach or listen server approach. Unreal by default only supports listen server approach. If you wanna export it for dedicated servers, it's kind of an advanced process, but I've attached some tutorials in the text-based description and tutorial of this product, so you can just follow along from those tutorials. But yeah, it's kind of complicated and more advanced compared to listen server. For listen server, you basically just need some third-party service such as EOS or Steam, and you can just play it just like that. It's not that complicated. But yeah, if you want to use a dedicated server, you just need to hook this up to here and set this to true and set this to the IP of your server. For localhost, when you are testing, this would be just what it is by default in here. And if you are gonna do a listen server approach, this one doesn't matter. You can just leave it as it is. It doesn't matter. Okay, now let's get to what you have to do for the game map. You need to have an instance of this actor poker game table inside your map. And as you can see, there are some views over here. You can see them right over here. I'll explain them one by one. Obviously, you can change the mesh or the texture and material you have in here as you desire. Then for each player, you have a hand transform. So like we have a player 4 hand transform, player 6 hand transform, and for each player up to 10 we have one of these. This basically defines where their cards would be located. And then we have the dealer icon under this hand transform. We have like the player's chipsticks, emoji plane, and info widget. And yeah, inside info widget we also have username and balance. If you want to make visual changes to it, this is where you can do that. And yeah, this widget is also a widget component that is visible in 3D view. So it's not like you need to add this widget to the viewport like you do usually with other widgets. These planes are also used just to show the emoji the player has selected or the dealer button when the player is the dealer of that hand. And the chips text, obviously, pretty simple stuff like that. Okay, then we have two different static mesh components. These are just some basic cubes. They're not visible in the game, they're hidden, but these define where the camera should be when you're playing the game. So as you can see, this is where the camera would stay, and this would be face down. This is also for the 3D view of the camera. You will see that option in the game. You can just switch between this position and this position. So you can just lean more towards your hand. This is what you will see basically, kind of. Then we have card spawn target transform. This is where the cards would get spawned from. This is better to be somewhere out of the field of view of the camera so players wouldn't see that it's spawning. Then we have the deck target transform. This is where the cards would pile up. So they spawn from that other point and they would travel from there to this point and they would get piled up right here. Then we have parent card target transform. This is somewhere far away. This is where the burn cards go between streets. The dealer would burn some card and they would just go over there. And then we have folded cards. This is again somewhere that the folded cards would pile up when players choose to fold. We have community cards, target transform. This basically defines where the middle of the target transform for community cards has to be. So there would be some cards on the left of this, some cards on the right of this. This basically designates the middle of that. And then we have the pot amount text. This is the text that would define how much we have in the main pot or in any of the side pots. It's basically just some text. You can change its visuals right over here. That's it for this actor. The next thing you can do, you have to do, is making a character. If you are importing this into some project you already have, so some pre-existing code, and it has its own character, you have to go through some steps. But if you're starting from scratch, you can just use the character we have here. But if you want to go through that process, you have to add these two components to your character. One of them is poker event binder, the other is lobby event binder. And then you would go to settings, and inside the implemented interfaces you implement these two. You press add and you find these two and you add them. Then all you have to do is make these two function calls and you'd be good to go. Just take a second to look at these and that's it. There isn't much else to do. The only thing that I still have to say is how to test this template out. If you want to test the listen server approach, you go over here. You have to make sure this is false. You set this to play as listen server. You set this to true, and that's all. That's all you need to do. If you want to test a dedicated server, you set this to true. You set this to play as client, and you set this to false. And then when you play the game, you see some players join the game. Oh, by the way, you have to change this number of players because obviously with one player there's no replication happening. So you set this to some number. If you use the slider, it can't go over 4, but you can just type any number you want. And yeah, that's it. When you set this to like the dedicated server setup, what you would see is like in this example, 2 player screens plus a like CMD window open up. That CMD window is where your server is. So those 2 game windows are basically just the players. The CMD window is the dedicated server. Also, as I've experimented, if you want to test the dedicated server, it's better you play in standalone game mode. Let me just show you. So this CMD window is the dedicated server, so any logs you see are things that are running on the server. And these 2 windows, we have 2 of them. These 2 are basically just the players. Yeah, that's it. That's how you can test the dedicated server. But building for dedicated servers is a lot more complicated. You can follow along the tutorials I've mentioned in the text description and instructions. And if you have any more questions about them after you complete those tutorials, feel free to ask us. So yeah, that's it. Have fun coding.